Hi, welcome to another edition of Simply Stated Ghost Stories at the Beach here in Lake Michigan. It is in the 60s and 70s today, and it's a nice day, although it is very windy. So I was actually trying to film this episode previously, and I had a cute little pink cowboy hat on and just like blew away. It's like literally blowing down the lake right now. So I hope you all are doing well for this edition of the show. We're going to be talking about the Vanity Fair parties, the history of them, importance, some of which was detailed in the past as a thought project, just so you know. And talk a little bit about the season two. It's definitely the time of year, Halloween coming up here in the USA, to get out your jack-o'-lanterns, try to keep all the bad energy away from your home, all that stuff, light some pretty candles, all that stuff, kind of get things going for yourself to kind of get your home in the mood and get yourself in the mood for the season and what it is. And that's part of doing the show Ghost Stories as well, although we'll be studying this probably, well, I will be studying this personally anyways into November and probably December. I have a few shows that I'm going to save for after the election because I don't think that it's okay to have them going on during the actual election itself. There's an election here in the U.S., so the material, I like it to be received for what it is instead of it potentially being misinterpreted as trying to sway the election process. So, it's always difficult when you recount history and criminal events and then current events with the white party, the issues with P. Diddy and J-Lo and her whole crew in Hollywood. That's just a long, long list of people, and the companies around all of it. It can get pretty political seeming to some people, and they sort of lose sight of the main issue of, labor rights, human trafficking, child abuse, drugs, cult behavior, human sacrifice that's gone on. Even as we look at the news cycle currently, it's a lot of stories about people having what appears to be sex with each other and has nothing to do with the actual issues. So it's kind of important to realize that when you watch the show and you listen to me speak about it, I'm trying to get you more informed and educated on an issue that's salient to labor rights in the U.S. and human trafficking issues, even if I do it in a two-piece with my hair and makeup kind of done and, got my earrings on here at the beach. So, but let's start with the history of Vanity Fair Mornings today. And the important thing to note about Vanity Fair magazine is that it was originally started as an actual traditional journalist publication. So it was supposed to be about, what the term and definition of the term Vanity Fair actually means, which is a ridiculously disgusting, overly done waste. And it means to be immoral, lacking in character, and to be completely wasteful, and to be overly done in wastefulness, to be completely, spend way too much money on something that's completely disgusting and just gross. Think of Greek orgies with people like filling themselves up on food and vomiting. That's Vanity Fair. It's just completely disgusting and debauched, and it's the most grotesque part of humanity. So you also need to remember there's an actual book about it, and which was turned into a play and then a movie. The movie was bad because the director and actually the actors in it failed to actually capture the meaning of the word and terminology for Vanity Fair, which shows you what the problem is. The actress who starred in Reese Witherspoon was actually one of the people that Kendrick put into Hollywood, and then she's actually at Endeavor, and is not actually really a part of CA, but for some reason it's continued to be listed as being CA, which is kind of weird. So if you want like weird, notable Vanity Fair facts, that's one of those. The first Vanity Fair party was actually held at a Morton's in Los Angeles after the Academy Awards in 1994, and it was co-hosted by Steve Tisch and Morton's, the company. The original restaurant was founded in Chicago in 1978. It's a big steakhouse. I was at the original event where Thursday Moon had been discussing with Kendrick for a while that they want to start having really disgusting parties around the Academy Awards, and that they want to start hosting them at Awards. They were going to have a Vanity Fair party. Then the magazine itself was going to change over from covering hard news and detailing stories on ways, the Manson cult, really hardcore issues and financial crimes in depth, which they were actually really good at one time, and that they were going to actually just start being a Vanity Fair itself. So the magazine has gone down hideously in quality over the last couple of decades, and that was a choice that Thursday Wilhelm directly targeted the magazine publication to make it that way. And even in 2013, I remember arguing with a woman who went by the name Cara Tila that hacked the National Capitol She was part of the attack, and she was holding a job in Arlington County at the time. Told me that they planned for everything to be Vanity Fair and just be disgusting. If you're still trying to understand what that is, it's Hugh Grant going through a really disgusting interview from a woman. This will be some kind of model, just Ashley. I don't know, Ashley Madison or someone like that. That's just awful, being really perverted to him in his old age. I'm talking about the Vanity Fair party, and he was talking about how he was planning not to go. And it's important to understand what actually happens at those parties. Because when I was very young, I was age 13 when Wilhelm went to Morton's Steakhouse in Chicago. Took me there with Wilhelm, the woman named Karen, Patricia, and had this elaborate dinner, and then talked to them about having these bizarre parties and wanting to start hosting them. And he said, can we kill people? And they said, fine. He said, could we kill her too? And pointed at me, and they said, no, she's too pretty. And from there, they began to set up, an arrangement to have me trafficked, which was really disturbing. And there was a number of times that trafficking was set up around Chicago, frankly. Kendrick is from Chicago. So a lot of these guys were actually Chicago people that were fairly difficult. And immoral to women. And of course, Kendrick did eventually get pushed out of CAA as an agent, but not until later in the 90s. As far as the Vanity Fair parties go, the point was for them to be allowed to put an event after the Academy Awards where they did cult practices, drugs, blood drinking, and murder. Oftentimes you saw a picture probably recently of Matt Damon at last year's party with his hand on some woman's butt. That's really not what's actually going on at them. That's a problem. The problem is really the weird violence and murders. It's the fact that, there's been a long history, and I tried to put a stop to this when I was in D.C. I was living there for 19 years during the investigations of these women being put out there as models, put on, all over the place, taken to the Vanity Fair party in the spring, they're dead, and then they've already put together the cover for Vogue that's going to come out in the summer, and then you never see them again. It's always in the same pattern, and I confronted Buffalo Bill about it in person, who refused to put a stop to it. So it's still going on. It happened just this last year in 2023. I saw a model. She went to the the Vanity Fair party, and she was on the cover of Vogue in the summer, and she's gone. I couldn't get it to stop. And he even confessed to me in advance he was going to do that again in that year. He's like, haha, see, look, I did it again. And I'm just watching this happen, and I can't do anything about it. All I can do is make these docu-series for you. So, of course, the original Morton Steakhouse, and to put a finer point on all of this, when I went out to the D.C. area, it's important to understand that seriously Wilhelm loved Morton's, and so I ended up becoming friends with the Morton's out in Rust, or the manager of it, Rustin, and the restaurant itself, and they said that they were in on doing the actual corporate investigations there, that a bunch of investigators had started at that restaurant, working their way through the company and shaking things up in the 2000s. And so the company had decided to head in a different direction from what the founders had done in Chicago. They decided that whatever that restaurant's decision had been made, in the 90s, it was passé, it was not with the times. But as you probably noticed, Morton's isn't as popular a restaurant as it used to be. And that is actually because of their poor decision at their original restaurant to participate in the Vanity Fair parties and what those actually became. The Vanity Fair parties are not a place you want to go unless you have really good security, and really you just would bop in and bop out, make an appearance and leave. They're not a place you're going to want to attend and hang out. And, I went through a really horrible phase where in my teens where I was being forced to say I actually wanted to go to one. I really didn't. I was definitely terrified of them. They're no different than the white parties where people are getting drugs, ritualistic abuse, murder, kinds of bizarre, disgusting behavior. So if you're still kind of confused about all this, the best reference I would give you is that Stanley Kubrick made a film called Eyes Wide Shut. And he actually died during the making of the film, so he couldn't put the finest point on it that he wanted to. But he really got into the bizarre cult practices around Hollywood and these weird parties that they've been having. And they were basically about the white parties. And also some of the stuff at the Vanity Fair party as well. And it was directly Kendrick and Wilhelm and seriously that stopped him from making the film the way he really wanted to. And unfortunately probably led to an earlier death for him as well. And it's depressing, but it's kind of important to know there's been a number of people lost along the way in the process of trying to expose some of this stuff. And it's also important to know that since he wasn't able to put the best point he wanted to on it, I can get that, which is that I've got a better one for you, just to make it really clear, is that there's a movie called Interview with the Vampire. It's from the mid-90s with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. And there's a scene in it where a young woman is pulled into a theater by a vampire called Ormond. And she begs for help and screams and cries that she's on stage with a bunch of actual vampires. And the audience ignores her It allows her to be fed on and killed by the vampires on stage. Whether they know the vampires or not, or she's really dying, nobody knows. And maybe they don't even care based on her responses. But that's like what's been going on at the Vanity Fair parties and the white parties, which is why they're not a place you ever want to go. I've never gone out of my way to go to a white party my entire life and will never go to one. Intentionally. If they're having a white party somewhere, I'm like, not going. So I just wouldn't bother. I avoid them all the time in DC. And they always look like these big, extravagant, beautiful events, and they're just not, they're really not at all. So it's kind of important to remember that the last time I went to something that might have been fairly similar to one, and I didn't want to be part of the rest of it, is I went to the party at the Mortons in Washington, D.C. in 2019. It was the last Luther College party there that they had, the Mortons Steakhouse downtown. I had security on the way down. I had to talk with DHS before I went there, and knew I had to like literally go and kind of make an appearance and leave and not come back. And literally like zoom in and zoom out of the restaurant itself, and make a point of not spending a lot of time there. And so, I mean, I kind of want to put all this in context for you because, having had an actual friend that worked at the Mortons and rested and how upset he was by all of it, how much his life was messed up. Like, he had a girlfriend at the time and got pregnant by somebody else. He ended up having to move across the country. He finally moved to Seattle because he was tired of everything. Like, he left the DC area over a lot of it. I advised him to get out of it. I said, you should just get out of Morton's altogether. I mean, they agreed to host these parties. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And really, I think what bothers me the most is I try to get the U.S. government to stop some of the bizarre practices with those parties, and I just wasn't able to do that for whatever reason. And that's kind of what I'm sort of curious about. That, it's just come out in the news, unfortunately, been sensationalized. They're pretending they're all having sex, and they're really not. And, I look through my notes here, and it's like, I really got this covered. What I want you to also understand is that, I worked so hard for my own safety in life that I went ahead and made arrangements, because Wilhelm wanted to keep saying he loved steakhouses, so I had arrangements made during the investigations that he had to take me to a different steakhouse for dinner, so we ended up with Chris for that reason. And, we had some really interesting times with Chris, but Chris doesn't have the same practices or reputation or even the same setup. Morton's is very dark, it's very hard to see. I only went to the party at the Luther College held in 2019 because the investigations were gone, but I literally went to the outdoor party of the patio, walked in, walked out, and that was it. I told him in advance, I'm like, don't expect anything else from me. I'm showing up at this for like a little bit and I'm leaving, and I'm never going to do anything social with you weirdos again. At least not intentionally. Here's the other problem is that I've had some stalking issues since I've gone to Michigan with some people I've been trying to, not deal with in that industry. And, for me, I think it was just a huge fight to make sure that I wasn't forcibly taken to a Vanity Fair party or one of those white parties. Some people think the rape I went through in 2019 was just some weird version of a white party all over again, which means that they're literally graphically getting out signet systems from Russia and torturing people. You also have to kind of look at the history of Chicago, because Al Capone was from Chicago. Remember I said in Dubuque in the 80s they were saying that Al Capone, they wished that he would come back and save them from what they were dealing with Cersei and Wilhelm. Like, they were so upset about everything. And I realized that Al Capone is seen more of his hero today by people in the American public because he stood up to the KGB, which is called the FSB of Russia, their practices, because so many people are just frightened by them and bullied by them, which is what you're really seeing in the U.S. even still currently. So, I want to sort of challenge you to think about all this, the context that it is. Enjoy the ghost stories for what they are, the spooky season of year that it is. And, I want to say something also, one of my previous episodes, I feel like I've been bullied a little bit, remembering that I was put in a relationship with Sean by CAA, and it was Kendrick's bad decision, immorality that led to that. And what I will say about him is that I came to realize that he might be somebody who may have not even really had a home, or may even been a homeless person. And to assume that he had a wife or a happy marriage or the life that he pretended to in the media might be really incorrect. And he set up a lot of kids and other people for abuse, but what he was trying to avoid was for any of us to actually be killed at some weird white party or Vanity Fair party or in some other type of situation. And because Kendrick really did just go off and kill people in front of me. And I can't blow home seriously. There were so many times people were just killed and none of it ever made any sense. So, you know, sometimes I think what Sean kind of left a lot of us with was that we were left with the experience of him setting us up for more abuse because he was setting us up to live until the rest of us could think of better solutions. So that's all I really have to say about it. So this was the episode on Vanity Fair, the white parties, and Morton Steakhouse.